Welcome to Called to Lead, a podcast series on pastoral leadership for today's church, presented by the Markey Center in Santa Clara University's graduate program in Pastoral Ministries. I'm your host, Dr. John Rinaldo. Join us and explore leadership in the Catholic Church through stories and conversations with pastors, ministers, and scholars. We connect theology with real-world ministry, highlighting how today's leaders answer God's call to build just and inclusive communities. Friends, to the inaugural episode of Called to Lead, presented by the Markey Center for Leadership and Ministry in Santa Clara University's graduate program in Pastoral Ministry. And I am so excited today because I am joined here by Dr. Melissa Broome Ursin, who is the Executive Director for the graduate program in Pastoral Ministries, and the Director for the Markey Center for Leadership and Ministry. We have Dr. Bridget Burke Ravizza, or Ravizza, as we would say in Italy. So how are you two doing today?
Great, John. So excited to be here.
I love it. I love it. Bridget, you doing well?
Yeah, doing well. Happy to be
Well,
with you.
here we go, the inaugural episode of Called to Lead, and I'm just so excited about this opportunity that we have as a university, as a program, as a center to serve the church in this unique way. And so before we get into what's happening in the graduate program in Pastoral Ministries and the Markey Center for Leadership and Ministry, Melissa, let's start with you. Can you just share with us a little bit of your path in ministry and what first drew you into the church?
Thank you, John. I'm a lifer, as Bishop McGraw used to say to me, but I grew up in the church choir. So I think the first church choir I sang in I was in second grade at my parish in New Jersey. The choir director quit the day before First Communion, and so they got us together, and it emphasized to me how important stable music ministry is. So I sang in church choir my whole life, in university choirs. Then I went on to study music and theology because I really felt like that was a gift I could share with the church. And when I started to think about music, I realized that I needed to learn a little bit more about liturgy, and how music served the liturgy. So I got my master's in liturgical studies, and then when I finished, I started working at an intercultural parish, and I fell in love with the richness of intercultural worship, and that intercultural context. So as my professional life grew, I found really that I was being called to think about what it means to be part of a church that is an intercultural, multicultural church, universal church, Catholic church. And then I went on to be working at the diocese as the director of worship at the cathedral, and thinking about context. What does it mean to worship together as a local church as well? So all of that really drew me deeply into this work of pastoral ministry.
Absolutely. And that was the Diocese of San Jose. And fun fact, Melissa and I actually went to undergrad school together for part of our time. So we've known each other for a little bit of time. That's incredible. Melissa, don't worry. We will not ask you to sing on this podcast, although I'm sure you would kill it. Bridget, tell us a little bit about your story, because you're not new to Santa Clara University, but you are new kind of coming back to California in this role. Tell us about your history.
Right. So I am also a lifer. My Catholic identity and the rituals of Catholicism are deeply ingrained in me. I have big families on both sides, all Catholics, and we were really involved in our parish when I was young. My dad was a lector, my mom was a Eucharistic minister. My sister and I, when we were in high school, used to help out with CCD and sometimes watch the little kids while their parents went to Mass. And I went to a little Catholic grade school, Mary Star of the Sea. And looking back, I don't know how this happened or what kind of supervision was involved, but I used to walk over during the lunchtime to the church and be a lector at church for the noon Mass.
Oh my goodness.
So I got to know a lot of people in that community. And so I was a little bit of just I think a church nerd. I always loved it, loved the rituals, loved the community. And I'd say my path to ministry, if you will, as an adult is an academic path. I studied religious studies at Santa Clara University as an undergrad. And I had a teacher who taught me the capstone course, The Experience of God, Sister Anne Marie Mangovin. And she was a Cincinnati Dominican, and she was the founding director of the GPPM. And she is the one who encouraged me to think about studying theology at the graduate level. And that brought me then to University of San Diego, where I got my master's in practical theology, and then to Boston College, where I studied theological ethics. And then I was a professor for 24 years at a small Catholic liberal arts school in Wisconsin, and just always thought about that as a vocation, helping students think about how their faith commitments and their values might impact their choices and how they can use their gifts to serve the world and the church. And now I'm here. Now I'm back at Santa Clara and thrilled to be thinking about these things in a new environment and capacity.
Well, church nerd is a title that I think all three of us probably embrace very fully. So I'm right there with you. And we're blessed, both you, Melissa and Bridget, you guys both started around the same time here in just 2025, like August, September 2025. So kind of this new trajectory, this new opportunities here for the graduate program in Pastoral Ministries and the Markey Center. Melissa, let's go back real quickly. What experiences in ministry most shape how you now think about leadership? You kind of talked about liturgy, you talked about intercultural church, but what's shaping you in terms of leadership in ministry?
When I think back on my time at my home parish growing up, I really think about the opportunity that I had to be a part of a parish that had an empowered, stable ministry leadership group. So all of the ministries in the parish were led by lay people. Some of them were paid. So the parish had made an investment in lay leadership in that way, that they were really saying the pastor can't do it all, and we want to have the qualified, prepared people in those roles. And that was really inspiring to me, I think, as a young person looking at women, most of them were women in the roles, and thinking I could maybe have a future in this kind of professional work, that we take ministry seriously. We have a high standard for the quality of what we're providing to the people of God. So that was really attractive to me. And our parish was thriving. We had 3 or 4 deacons that were ministers in the parish.
Wow.
So I think all of that really kind of comes together in the GPPM, and that we were founded to prepare lay leaders, and we also fulfill our duty to the church in preparing deacons as well. So it seemed like a really good fit for me, and really exciting place to be.
What's beautiful about the GPBM, you already mentioned it, is we help with the diaconate formation for both the Diocese of San Jose and the Diocese of Monterey, which is really a beautiful thing. What's cool about your story, Melissa, is that it was role modeled for you, right? What a thriving church looks like, what people living out their baptismal call, both as clergy and as lay people, really model it for you, and you bring that vision to your leadership today. Bridget, same question for you. What were some of those early experiences? You already talked about, jaywalking across across the church to go lecture as a kid, as a young person. What were some of those formative experiences that have defined the way you look at leadership in ministry?
Mhm. I think similar to Melissa, my thoughts go to role models that I've had. My parents also were both in higher education. I've just been steeped in Catholicism and have had so much exposure to great leaders in the church, but also in Catholic education. And so just blessed to know a lot of great priests over the years, including the Jesuits at Santa Clara in BC. I've also just been inspired and have had really meaningful relationships with women religious. I mentioned Anne Marie Mangovin. We became really close over the years, but also RSCJs I knew in San Diego, CSJs in Wisconsin, just smart, dynamic, capable women who providing these powerful models of leadership. I think about just broadly women religious, running hospitals and schools and involved in all of these social justice efforts around the country and around the world. And then, like Melissa, just benefiting my own faith life from the work of so many gifted lay leaders in parishes and Catholic schools. So I guess I've just learned that the church really depends upon and benefits from the leadership of many different kinds of people, right? Um, Women and men, clergy and lay, that we have such a rich and diverse church. And so I'm excited through my work at the Markey Center to be drawing out the gifts, the many gifts that people have to bring. And so, yeah,
That's
again,
exciting.
very excited about the work.
The role model piece, right? That continues
Mhm.
to be and I think all of us, when we look at our careers and our vocation in ministry, there are people that, shepherd us or accompanied us in this journey or encouraged us in this journey. And so there's a nice truth there in terms of what good pastoral ministry looks like, in terms of how we model what it means to be a Catholic Christian today. So both of you really nailed that really very well. Melissa, back to you. So, looking at today, the graduate program in Pastoral Ministries at Santa Clara University is really, I would say, maybe a little bit of bias, is on the forefront of how we're trying to form leaders in the church. And I'm biased because, of course, I also teach in the program. So, full disclosure there in terms of that. But as you enter into this new role, you've been in the role for just under a year. What do you hope it offers the church now, especially in the moment that we're living in right now?
So, the graduate program forms pastoral leaders with an emphasis on theological knowledge, servant leadership, pastoral proficiency, and appreciation for culture and diversity. So, considering the invitation that is in our church today to live into our identity as a synodal church, our students are prepared to minister in a variety of contexts. And our pursuit of theology is not for theology's own sake, but it's meant to be practical and it's meant to be implemented. And so the students who are in the GPPM leave their classes at the end of the quarter with a project ready to go and implement in their parish context. And I think it's really important that we give people in ministry formation space to develop as ministers and space to creatively think about, what would I do in my parish? Because sometimes when we're in the work, we don't have the time to think. So I think it really gives us it gives them the opportunity to take a step back and be more intentional in design and planning as well, and have the space for that.
I absolutely love that, right? And even things like the foundational classes we offer, like Christology or New Testament, Old Testament, like that's also still an element, right? We have youth and young adult ministry classes, we have Latino ministry classes, we have restorative justice, we have chaplaincy, and all of it is about okay, when this quarter ends, when this class ends, what are you going to do with this? And
Mhm.
that's a beautiful piece to this. So, Bridget, the Markey Center for Leadership and Ministry is part of the graduate program Pastoral Ministry. So there's a lot of collaboration and work here together. How do you describe the purpose in how do you describe its purpose in a way that connects with people actually doing ministry on the ground?
Yeah, at the Markey Center, we offer lectures and workshops and other programs that are aimed to develop empowered, informed, and resilient leaders who work in parishes, schools, and other ministry settings. We want to provide, I hope, intellectually engaging and spiritually enriching learning opportunities for pastoral leaders, for people who are considering ministry, and also for others in the community who are just thirsty for the kind of theologically centered programming that we do. Part of our particular mission, because this was important to Marge Webb and to her cousin, Father Markey, for whom the center is named, interested in celebrating and promoting women in ministry. So one of the ways we do that is through the Markey Women in Ministry speaker series, but in other ways as well. And I guess all of our our efforts are ultimately aimed at building a more collaborative, just church and world. And that makes sense being rooted, I think, in a Jesuit institution.
Yeah, I think the Jesuits in Santa Clara University really were really thinking ahead, a big picture vision when we established the Markey Center for Leadership and Ministry with its purpose that you name, because not just about degrees and going to classes, right? But again, what does this kind of look like on the ground? Melissa, obviously the GPPM and Markey Center are complementing one another with different ways of doing it, but there's a complement in forming pastoral leaders. Where do you see the two really collaborating and complementing what it is we're trying to do as we form future and current leaders in the church?
Yeah, Markey plays a critical role in the work of the GPPM because it makes high quality ministerial formation available to parishes and dioceses for little to no cost. So it is how we as a university fulfill our mission to serve the church, but it is limited because you can only go so far in a Saturday morning session or even a weekend session. Um, but it helps people think maybe I might be ready to take the next step in my journey. Maybe I might be called to give more to my parish and I need to deepen my ministerial skills. Maybe I'm ready for an MA in pastoral ministry, and then they're led to the GPPM to fulfill that desire or dream that they could have for their future.
Yeah. I love that so much. And again, what's beautiful about the GPPM and the Markey Center, it's really rooted in reality. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to give leaders in the church skills, experience, background knowledge, understanding church documents, whatnot, again, to really reimagine, really relook at, re-envision how we do pastoral ministry in the 21st century today. I think nobody listening to this podcast would argue that the church has dramatically changed in the last 25 years, since we moved in the new millennia, with technology, with COVID, with all sorts of things that have happened in terms of the changing tide, secularization, polarization, all those things play a role. And those are all topics in some way, shape, or form that need to be addressed both in the Markey Center and through the graduate program Pastoral Ministries as well. Okay, so how do the programs at the Markey Center and GPPM, how do we help leaders navigate the complexity that we just talked about, right? Parishes look different now than they do today. Institutions are changing, diocesan structures are changing, resources are limited in some cases, and obviously there's cultural change, demographic shifts, and whatnot. How do we, as leaders, how does the GPPM and Markey Center help leaders navigate the complexity without losing hope or their sense of vocational call?
Right. Yeah. I think this is where our charism as a Jesuit institution is so critical. Because Ignatian spirituality, Ignatian discernment gives ministers the ability to take a step back and ask for the grace to understand how Jesus is inviting us to respond to those challenges. So in some cases, that might mean letting go, and in others, excuse me, it might mean to work more earnestly for justice rooted in Catholic social teaching. So being able as a leader to use those Ignatian techniques helps us keep that long vision and not be discouraged by the bumps in the road.
One of the beautiful aspects of Jesuit tradition is the idea of discernment and myself being formed from two Jesuit universities, Loyola Marymount University and Santa Clara University. That idea of discernment is so essential to how not only I lead in ministry, but how I try to live life and how I parent and how I try to be a
Mhm.
good husband in everything that I do. And Melissa, you're also kind of naming this other reality, which Pope Francis has really moved us forward on, is this idea of synodality, right? So how do we listen not only to the Spirit of God, discernment, but those around us, and really do pastoral ministry in light of what we're hearing, right? The
Mhm.
Vatican II often talked about signs of the times, right? And how do we respond to the signs of the time? Well, Pope Francis put his imprint on that with synodal thinking as a way of doing that. Bridget, same thing. As we look at the Markey Center, again, what are we doing? You talked about some of the workshops you're providing, your Women in Ministry lecture series as an example. What does this look like today, practically speaking, as we begin to envision where the Markey Center is moving in the next 3 to 5 years?
Mhm. It's a great question, and we're continuing to figure out what the answer is going to look like. But Melissa did bring up Catholic social teaching, and we've settled on that for the theme of next year's programming, which I think is really important. You know, you're talking about navigating the complexity of our communities and also just the suffering and the division that we experience all around, but also in our church communities, thinking about how we can practice solidarity and stay grounded in hope in the midst of those complexities and divisions. You know, I think we live in tough times, and being an effective leader who can inspire hope and positive change in these times is challenging, and we need to do that in community. You know, hope is not naive optimism, right? Hope is deep from a Christian perspective. It's rooted in faith, but we have to work at it. And I think we can find it in community. We need to help each other live hope and maintain hope.
You preach, seriously, because it's so easy to lose hope when you look at the world around you and go like, what is going on? That's such a beautiful message there. This podcast is a product of the Markey Center and the GPPM. So this is one of these ideas that we're throwing out there, to support pastoral leaders in the work of the church, and I'm excited to be part of that. So first of all, thank you to the two of you for allowing me to take a lead on this and help make this happen. I'm excited about the potential reach of what we could do for pastoral leaders, not just in the United States, but worldwide at some point. That's the great thing about technology. You never know who's going to be listening to these podcasts, and we hope to play a specific role with this Call to Lead podcast. Both of you, how do you feel? Why did a podcast feel like an important extension of the work that we're trying to do at GPPM and the Markey Center?
So I just think it's another way to make our work accessible. And I know people come into learning about things through a variety of modalities. I know there are people out there that really want to listen to a podcast about this, and they want, that might be an entry point that they wouldn't have had if we were only a website. So I'm really happy that we have this available to us.
And the listeners need to know that Melissa is not necessarily a podcast listener, which is fine, right? But to your point, like she's like, I'm not a podcast listener, but there's a need and there's an audience. So let's do it. So
Yeah.
kudos to you, Melissa,
I'll
for allowing that.
I'll just say my commute is less than 10 minutes. So there's really not, thankfully, never had the opportunity to say, what am I going to do on my 40-minute commute? Let me listen to a podcast.
I love it. Well, to get a little insight in John Rinaldo's world, as I drive my kids around, I'm certainly listening to podcasts, but my wife especially knows that there'd be no surprise I'm listening to a podcast or an audiobook while I'm doing laundry or folding clothes or cooking dinner or shaving in the morning. And so there's lots of opportunities there. So I am a podcast junkie. So Melissa, this works perfectly. Bridget, you were cheering. I saw your hand motions when we were talking about podcasts. And so I suspect you are more of a podcast person. Tell us a little bit about kind of what you're thinking and your hopes for this podcast as we launch this, into the world.
Yeah, so I also am a podcast junkie. And as you've said, just the wider reach for the work that we do and the kind of conversations that we have in the GPPM and Markey Center programs. I think conversations with ministers and leaders on the ground helps us connect theory to experience. I just think we can learn so much from hearing other people's perspectives and experiences. I am a firm believer in the transformational power of stories. As Christians, we're a storied people, and we're changed by stories. They can challenge us and inspire us and help us reconsider our own stories and deepen our understanding of our own vocations. So my hope is that people who tune in will experience that.
I love that. And one of our hopes with this podcast is to interview practitioners who are out in the field and been doing it for a while, to interview academics, those who are intensely studying some of these topics, maybe ecclesiology, Christology, or practical theology, whatever it may be, to break open some of that academic side. But I hope to get pastors and clergy and deacons and lay leaders in the church, and I want to hear from parishioners and parents. And so really, that for fear of making it sound too broad, it is the storytelling component, Bridget, that you're talking to. And part of what we're hoping to do with this Call to Lead podcast is to break out those stories and hear those different perspectives, because I think a pastoral minister in the trenches needs to hear from a pastor, and help understand how the pastor is thinking or reacting to the certain things, or how a parent in the pew who's trying to navigate multiple kids in life and how that affects how we might lead in ministry today. So really excited about where we're going with this podcast, and where it leads us. So we've got some great guests coming up here. We've had two great guests here already. I got one last question for you before we close up today. If someone listens to this podcast over time, how do you hope it shapes the way they understand leadership in the church?
So I think that when we share stories of leadership, two things happen. First, we realize that we're not alone in our challenges. And more often than not, others are really experiencing similar things. And second, when we talk about leadership, perhaps it might inspire others to try something new or integrate something that they hadn't talked about before. So over time, I hope that it will just shape their creativity as leaders in the church. It will broaden their horizon of possibilities as they lead, and that they will become more comfortable in their role as leaders.
I love that. And own it, right? Own their role. I love that. Bridget, same question for you. How do you hope this shapes leaders in the church, this podcast?
I like what Melissa said about really, I think it can strengthen community, a sense of community, us not being alone in the work that we do. And also, as you say, John, talking to different sorts of people, a sort of many parts, all one body. Just even finding out about the different kinds of leadership that is necessary in the church. And a last thing I'd say is, and it's, I think, been present just in this conversation, a sense of joy. Again, we mentioned things are hard, things are tough. Sometimes we encounter conversations, what are presented as conversations in the public realm that are really antagonistic. People are on different sides of issues, and so I think our hope, having talked about what we want to have happen, is to be together in a spirit of joy. And Pope Francis emphasized this. If we're doing church but we're not joyful, we're doing it wrong. So that's also something that we can take the church seriously and take justice making and peacemaking seriously and all these things, but we don't necessarily need to take ourselves too seriously. So I do think this is a medium of having just joyful conversations.
Joy of the gospel, right? Pope Francis's document. So I love that. Thank you for that, Bridget. So, well, you guys are stuck with me, and I try to bring joy everywhere I go. So, and I know you guys do the same. So I'm so thankful to both of you for joining us on this inaugural episode of Called to Lead. So, Dr. Melissa Broome Ursin, again, Executive Director for the Graduate Program in Pastoral Ministries, and then Dr. Bridget Burke Ravizza, or Ravizza. I'm going to do the Italian thing from now on, who is the director of the Markey Center for Leadership and Ministry, both at Santa Clara University. Thank you both so much for joining us again on this inaugural episode. Thank you for your gift of ministry and what you're doing for the church, not only locally at Santa Clara University, but what we're doing for the wider church community. That wraps up our inaugural first episode of Called to Lead. We thank you so much for joining us. Remind you all that if you like what the conversation you heard today, please follow and make sure you get in the podcast feed in your podcast every time we release a new one. We're excited about what's to come in this first season of the Call to Lead podcast. So thank you all for tuning in. God bless you in your ministry, and we'll see you in the next episode.